Good evening, everyone. I am Daryl D'Souza, founder of Earthkeepers Connect and convener of the New Earth Summit. Your host for this evening, the 29th day of the pre-summit webinars leading up to the New Earth Summit in November. It is the second edition of India's first integrative summit on solutions to our problems in health, food, farming, and environment. I extend a warm welcome to our esteemed panelists of this evening, and also on behalf of our 10 Earthkeeper groups in India and overseas. And we express our gratitude to you for taking out time from your busy schedules to be with us and to share your wisdom and insights so that all watching this webinar and its recording also later may better understand how to manage iron ore mining in Goa in a way that benefits its people, the environment, and the state as well. So that's our topic for this evening, iron ore mining in Goa. I will start with introducing our panelists to the audience. Anamika Gode is a lawyer by profession and has been associated with the Goenche Mati movement since some time. She looks at the legal perspective of what the laws allow for or restrict in mining, and also the people's rights to the usage of resources of their state and its environmental impact, and also the personal impact on the health of mining workers and people living in the mining areas. Ramesh Gaons has a state as well as national award for teaching. Also, the Goan Volunteers Service Icon Award by Goa Sudharu Community Development, Incorporated in USA, California Award by Maharashtra Foundation, and many more awards. He has worked in the anti-superstition movement, the Knit India movement on communal harmony, and also as a priest in the Weddings for National Integration movement, where he performed 14 weddings. For the last 40 years, Ramesh has been helping with solving all types of issues in Goa. Our third panelist, Vishal Rowley, is a designer and content creator. He also works in the area of alternative education. He has designed and produced various communication collaterals for rights-based organizations and advocacy groups such as publications, websites, videos, games, posters, etc. In Goa, he works actively with organizations such as Goenche Mati Movement, Konkan Development Society, Talent in Youth Trust, and others. So here is our first question for the panelists this evening. What is the current status of mining in Goa and who in Goa is affected by it? And what way? Anamika, could you please take it first?
Okay, so I mean, in the sense of what is the status of mining in Goa, there is currently, I mean, it would depend. If you're talking about iron ore mining, there is no iron ore mining at this current point of time. And the reason for that is multiple interventions from the Supreme Court, where the leases, the mining leases that were granted, have been set aside as being completely illegal. So I'll just give you, I think Daryl had told me that perhaps there may be people watching who don't have any idea of what the situation is. So I'll just give you in simple, sort of brief recap of what has happened with mining in Goa. In 2012, there was a report that was done by Justice Shah, the Shah Commission report, which revealed a very horrific situation about mining in Goa. It revealed several violations of environmental norms by mining lease holders, a lot of mining that was going on within forest and wildlife areas. And most importantly, it also found that most of the leases, or if not all of the leases, had actually expired and mining was going on without any valid leases. Uh, Based on this report, in fact, the Goa Foundation approached the Supreme Court of India, seeking a complete seeking that all of the leases that are there be set aside and fresh renewals also be granted, and that action be taken based on the findings of the Shah Committee report. In 2014, the Supreme Court came out with its judgment, set aside all of the leases that were granted, and thereafter, what happened was the state. I mean, there were some writ petitions that were filed by some of the mining companies, stating that they be granted a second renewal order on the basis of the fact that they had paid stamp duty, some of them had paid royalty, and so on. Thereafter, within a span of, I think, about 2 months, between November 2014 to Jan 2015, the state government hurriedly renewed about 88 mining leases. We believe that that was done without proper investigation into how those leases were granted, whether there was compliance with all of the norms, and so on. And anyway, the leases were granted, mining resumed, and I think the aftermaths of that, the way the mining resumed was something that I think only the people who live in these areas that are surrounded by mines and live in the mining villages, mining affected villages, so to speak, are the ones who can perhaps tell us best. I, in my limited experience, did also see some of these effects. For example, in Sunshi village, you had immense dust pollution purely due to the transport of mined ore through the village road. If you see the pictures from that time, it's completely orange, just complete dust. Dust had filled everything. Their water was polluted. It was unlivable, those conditions. And those people had to live through all of that just because the mining companies were in such a hurry to quickly remove as much as they could. Thereafter, the Goa Foundation again approached the Supreme Court to say that the manner in which the second renewals were granted to these companies were in violation of the previous Supreme Court's order and the provisions of the Mines and Minerals Act. The Supreme Court finally delivered its judgment in 2018, holding that yes, the manner in which the second renewals were granted were completely illegal and set aside all of the renewed leases, which is why you have a situation right now where there are no leases, there are no legible mining leases in the state of Goa. There was a direction, in fact, to the state government to ensure that they grant fresh leases as per the provisions of the Act. So now the reason that there is no mining is something that I think needs to be clarified. There's a lot of hype about how there's a ban on mining and people don't want mining to resume, and that is sort of stopping development, it's stopping money coming into the state and so on. And of course the mining dependent people, which I think is a valid point, are affected. But what we have to remember here, that the reason that the mining is not starting is because the state government is just for some reason refusing to act upon the Supreme Court's directions. They want to do everything possible to somehow ensure that the same leaseholders who were granted the second renewals and who had been illegally mining previously are granted the right to mine again. Now, that is the main issue. They want to go as far as to try and amend the law to be able to grant the leases to those same people. That is the simple reason why mining is not restarting in Goa and why mining is not happening in Goa. But I think one good thing is that it gives us a sort of time to pause and reflect on this, how mining had happened and the situation that it had created, especially for the villages that are in and around the mining belt, and try and look at a better way to do this. And first, to see how these areas can be rehabilitated so that the people who live in these areas don't have to suffer again. In the 2018 judgment, the second judgment of the Supreme Court, which set aside the mining leases, the judgment states, actually uses the word rapacious for how the mining was carried out. The speed and the sort of rampant manner in which everything was done with zero, consideration of environmental norms, pollution norms, and so on. And most importantly, and I think what has sort of hit me a lot in my work in this field, is the complete disregard for the rights of the people who live in the mining villages that are around these areas. And I think in terms of what is the status of mining, or how, what we have to think about, I think this is something that should sort of take center stage in any sort of talk about mining. Mining dependence, yes, of course, have been affected, but it is also the residents of mining affected villages that need to be spoken about.
Right, Anamika, thank you for that. And I completely understand what you're saying, because during that period, I actually happened to pass that area without even realizing, because this is the problem. People in the city, I mean, in, populated areas, and especially along the coast, we have hardly ever been over there, and I had never been there in my life. So I was going a little outside, and I came across this area, and it was all, there was all red on the road, and I suddenly felt the need to, because there was red dust, and of course there were some trucks in front and something behind, and suddenly I said, no, what the hell is going on here? And I pulled up my windows, and just after I went for another 10-15 seconds, I said, oh my god, this is that mining area, you know. So I can totally believe what's happening over there. I could not take it. I had to wind up my windows and go out. Then I slowed down. Actually, I slowed down and I parked to the side, and I said, let me see this scenario. And there were actually mining trucks passing.
I mean, not everyone doesn't have the option to roll up their windows and leave the area,
Yes, yes, especially as you're saying, the people who are staying there, the people who have got homes, I mean, how are they going to block the air? And sometime back also, I was having a conversation last year. Last year, when we did the summit in November, we presented a special topic, which was, local sustainable livelihoods in Goa. And we presented about 7, 8 new livelihoods in Goa. And I made a comment at that time. If there are people who are jobless from the mines, they should come and take up these, professions. And we had showcased about how small, organic farmers that can grow. A green state like Goa, we are not getting organic food, and food is coming from out of state with full of chemicals. So that was one small clusters of farmers. How then the second was wellness tourism that I presented, and that was small wellness centers, Portuguese villas, but people getting trained in simple therapies like yoga, pranayam, acupressure. That's what I teach. Healing with herbs, healing with diet, and these are things that you don't need to go to college for a month or two or get a degree. People, I've taught people, and they've learned and practiced these things within 3 months. So that is an amazing perspective that the even this year we presented that topic again, and it's a review, and some couple of more opportunities were put in there. And the main thing is that they are all local and eco-friendly jobs. They do not damage the environment. So I can't imagine any mining or person who's working in the mines who would not want to get out of that place and all of that smoke and sit in a nice wellness center and be doing foot reflexology for somebody, or be teaching somebody yoga. So yes, so that's an important alternative that people, and even the everybody who has an opinion that, oh, there are so many jobs lost, I think they should see our presentations and try and get these people and rescue them to a better life. They're having such a difficult time. Yes, Ramesh, would you please give us your insight into what do you feel is happening now with mining, and a little bit of how you have been involved with it?
See, I got involved because of one of the mine which was coming close to my school, and right on the bank of the river, which is flood prone. The bank of the river and the lease boundary is one and the same for 1 kilometer. In such a condition, it was going on. And then I had to come down into all this mining business and then study all this laws and everything, environment, what is that mine is. And then I started getting a picture, and the picture was absolutely horrible. For 70 years, there was no government which looked at the mines very seriously, or no agency monitored any single mine, because 1997 there is a TERIS report, Area Wide Quality Impact Environment Management Plan. it clearly says that there is no monitoring whatsoever in Goa as far as mining is concerned. So that is how I got into that. And then I had to fight alone, single-handedly against that mine. And I got the environment clearance put in abeyance with the help of this Delhi High Court. So that was the biggest challenge, and I could succeed. And then everybody very easily understood that yes, mine can be stopped. Mine can be stopped.
Yes, Ramesh, could you tell us which year was that when the Delhi court?
It was 2009.
Oh, okay.
2009 and 2006 I started it. That prior to that, everybody was thinking that it is almighty. Mines are almighty and the leaseholders are also superpowers. So there is no power which can stop the mine, and that was the belief. But when I stopped it, everybody could understand that yes, it can be stopped. And there I gave a very smashing kind of a smashing attack, that yes, a single man can do wonders. A common man should not be underestimated. That is what I say. Yeah. But what I understood, I got a panelist, what panelist said, being a lawyer also. See, in the last year of the mines, before it was banned, there was a production and export of 54 million tons, which is too much, And second thing is that even after 70 years, there is no audit of what has happened in the mining areas. There is no audit about the environment destruction. There is no audit how many water bodies have been destroyed. There is no audit on how many fields, how many paddy fields have been silted. There is nothing, no report with agriculture department, how many horticulture areas have been silted, how many water bodies have been killed, how many wells have been totally dried up. I can give figures. See, there is the Shirgaon, very small area. Shirgaon is 3 square kilometers area. And out of 3 kilometers square area, 2 square kilometers is covered by the 3 mines. How can the people stay? How? And there are 76 wells which have gone dry. Take the example of Pisurle. 80 wells have gone dry. So the tanker is providing water. Now there is another Sangek thing. The Kolam village. The village area is 16 square kilometers and 14 square kilometers covered under the leases. Tell me, how can people live? Somebody has to look at this kind of a situation very sensibly. Our politicians has no time or no guts, I would say, no guts to look at the mines in this manner. Whatever now that is happening, dodging of the things, is because, let me tell the lawyer also, that there are no number of politicians who have bought the leases benami. And if anything happens, if the auction takes place, as the Supreme Court order, the first one says that mandatory auction should take place. Why that is being dodging is because if the auction takes place, these people are going to lose crores and crores of money. And that is why they are dodging, and they don't want to start the mining, and they want to victimize the laborers, victimize the truck owners. This is how the Goa's mining is going on. But let me tell you, see, I am not looking at mining in isolation. I'm looking at the mining in a very holistic and a very comprehensive manner, with the paddy fields, with the water bodies, the health of the people, the liquor shop, including in the village, how they have increased with the increase of the mining. So unless and until you don't understand this, you cannot speak on the mines very confidently. That is why I am very confident about everything. So I'll just give you, there are 102 mines in 1 kilometer in 12 water bodies and Sangay. And Rich Land, Poor People is a report published by Center for Environment from Delhi. It clearly says in the Mandovi catchment area, there are 27 largest mines operating and generating 1,01,024 tons per day, generating rejection. Just imagine how much it is coming up. In 74, Sen Gupta had said that is 70,000 of dust particles are getting deposited every day in Mandavi. That is 74 I'm talking about. Recently, no study has been carried out. No study has been carried out. This is the saddest part. I don't understand why our politicians don't have the guts. I can understand it. They don't have guts because, see, though we think that the government is ruling, in fact, it is not the government, it's the mining lobby which is ruling Goa. That is the saddest part. And that is why no government, whichever it may be Congress or maybe BJP, everybody is at the mercy of the mining lobby. Now, how can people then get relief? How can people be saved from all this mining massacre, mining melons? Is a big question.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
and
Ramesh, for those insights and your practical experience and survey details also. Vishal, could you please throw light from your perspective?
Mine is mostly second-hand knowledge from reading about. I've been to Kaure, and actually I grew up in Odisha, so I used to go. There are lots of mines there. Some of my family also had a portion of the mines, so I used to play in those limestone mines because there are caves and things, and in the center of the mining pit is always a lake. So it used to be like this crazy landscape where as children we used to play and find it very fascinating. And those big machines were like awe-inspiring. Yeah. And if you see the Tambri Mati of Goa is exactly the same as Odisha, same iron ore. And I've been in lots of mines. But until I went to Kaure with Professor Alito and saw those, there have been some deaths due to the lines of trucks. And, Ravindra Velip is from that village. And I could not believe like how chock-a-block those roads were, like with truck after truck after truck. And this was not the peak of mining. This was the temporary phase when mining had opened in between. And I also got an insight from, like Ramesh Baba said, there is very little data, and the data is mind-numbing when you see the numbers. And sometimes that numbers, cannot fully tell the impact. They are just become numbers. But there's a book, it's called Upheaval in English, or Achiv, by Pundalik Nayak. It's written in 1977. It's about what happened to a village in Goa when mining came in. So it starts with this very beautiful village and this farmer who is getting his field ready for sowing. So he's always the most diligent farmer, and his seedlings are ready. He's the first in the village to prepare his field and get them ready for sowing. And he's done his hard work, and is looking at this next day all ready for sowing. It's a very auspicious day. Sowing is going to happen. And that evening, somebody visits him and says, see, you have a bullock cart, and there is some people who need something transported till the river. Will you lend your bullock cart? He said, no, wait, tomorrow is my sowing. So he said, they will give you 50 rupees. He's just stunned. He's never seen a lump sum amount of 50 rupees ever been offered to him in his entire life. And early in the morning, he decides to take his bullock cart to the river to load that thing. And he's actually participating in the mining business, where mines, instead of these trucks now, was in bullock carts taken to these canoe boats and not those barges now, and carried like that. And his fields remain unsold. This is the first few pages of the book, And just to skip to the end, and sorry for spoiler alert and all that, it ends with him being a drunk, his daughter becoming a prostitute, his son becoming a wife-beater truck driver. And in the whole book, you see how village, and there is traditions in the village. There is all the customs celebrated. There are different festivities, seasons, and they slowly just completely get eroded, and it becomes a dust bowl in all sense of the word, in a literal sense, in a figurative sense, in a cultural sense, and that devastation to a beautiful life, which happens. And that is just, it makes your, gives you goosebumps to realize how devastating it can be. And this is written in 1977. And we are now here in 2020. Nothing much has changed, but there is some amount of change. Of course, there's activism by Goa Foundation, and I think Ramesh Bab before that has shown that if some people just stand up, and there is a constitution, there is a law in place, and it takes some spine. Ramesh Bab has constantly called the politicians without any guts, but he's shown alone what guts is. And this is where we all need to really believe that change is possible. And I was also reading something about the sort of the planetary scope of mining. And capitalism always finds the cheapest natural resource and the cheapest labor around the world. So from Chile to China, there's a series of ports and docks and loading points and jetties, and which are carrying mineral across the planet. Wherever mineral can be found cheaper, where labor can be found cheaper, these capitalist hawks will come, swoon down, and they'll grab that land, transport it across seas and across countries to wherever, and exploit it. That's the exploitative nature of this capital. And very innocently, the poor lives of the mine worker or the farmer or the transporter along the way, their lives are sacrificed in this global supply chain, right? And so then where do you find resistance in this huge mechanism where this robotic machines with their metal claws is eating up the earth, and it is taking away resources and alienating people from their own sustainable livelihoods, so where they had springs, they had green fields, they had sustainability, right? And from giving up their life of sustainability, they become wage workers. So the transition of sort of what you call subsistence living, or living with plenty, which you get from nature, is become a wage labor. This tragedy is a huge tragedy. But this essay I was reading also talks about the forms of resistance, and it says the mine workers in Chile to mine workers in Chhattisgarh, to the transporters in Bihar, to the transporters in China, the people working factories. All these workers, the labor, they have a lot of common ground. So all these nodes of transport of capital also become these nodes of resistance. So wherever people can collect and blockade a jetty, wherever they can strike against pollution of the groundwater, wherever they can strike up and show the pollution law, there's possibility to break the whole supply chain, right? So any of those nodes can become the fracture point, because a lot of people need to work in tandem, and with greed, and this and money has to pave the way for this to happen. But if there is a soul and there is a righteousness, and these things can be changed. And I've read Norma's essay on the small victory they had at Shirgaon, and how agriculture returned to that village after I think 33 years or something like that. And they have this season, I think first time the fields have been planted, and they're seeing some greenery. The miners were made to pay a heavy penalty and desilt the fields. And in this small way, you see, and people have realized after all those years that what they gave up to get that mining was not worth it. And these things really need to be highlighted. And I'm in the business of content creation, collecting stories and trying to see how this can be communicated well. we will keep up our effort to highlight what is so obviously right and what is so obviously wrong, and that will hopefully be an eye-opener. And that requires a great role for media platforms like such, so that the truth comes out to the people. I mean, Goa is dealing through like this whole onslaught of coal, which is going to be the next devastator. There's such a great groundswell on the people coming up, and they are able to communicate now and reveal to everybody what this plan for the destruction of Goa is. So I really hope like we can get the truth out there, get the public opinion behind it, and oust these puppets of the capitalists who are just using their position, their political position, to really suck this state dry.
Yes, thank you, Vishal, for that, perspective and the reference also with other countries and what's happening in other places of India. Now, very clearly, we can see from this that it seems that capitalists have, the control on this, and through their lobby and their activities, there's not much that even the states, because I was also, meeting with Goenche Mati team about 2-3 years back, and I could see from the evidence that the state, even when mining was going on, the state would not get its, income that it should have got, and most of it was going to the mining barons. So let's talk about that also, and that will bring me to my next question, uh, which is, if mining has to, continue in Goa, what is the best way forward? How can we, and this also the topic of intergenerational equity, the rate at which these mining companies were taking out ore from the land. It is, and it was at such a fast rate that there's going to be nothing left for the next generation. So how does the next generation get money from this resource? So could you talk about that, uh, Ramesh? Could you please give your view on that? What is a balanced way to protect the environment and also the people, and mainly how can the state, benefit from this? Because after all, it is the resource of the land, and people have elected all of their, politicians and administrators into office to take care of them and their resources. But the exact opposite is happening. Ramesh, could you please share your views?
So as it is, whatever that is going on, as it is, nothing can be happen, nothing can happen, and nothing can be changed. Even we expect many things, intergenerational equity and whatever it is, but if the same leases goes into the hands of the same mining barons, no change will take place. They will try to grab as much as possible and finish up within no time. So if the government goes like Karnataka, making corporations, and then try to excavate and export, I think that is a best possible solution. So, or as Ravindra says, cooperative, but that idea is not that much good, because I know in Goan society what can come out through this cooperative movements. I'm not going to comment on that. But government has to start a business in a different manner, and then there should be a monitoring, very strict monitoring on this. Second thing is there should be no compromise on environment. Let me tell you, no compromise. I talked to one of those chief ministers about Sarauli. Sarauli is in Sangay, largest area, more than 700 square kilometers and 538 square kilometers of the forest. That is why there is Sarauli Dam. You know, 55% of the Goa's population is dependent on the Sarauli. Now, and there are 16 mines, 4 were under operation. If nothing can happen as far as this Sarauli Dam is concerned, government is not taking very serious cognizance of the mines and then try to put restrictions. I think we are going to have a shortage of drinking water also. Second, I would like to tell you, and then I'll like to comment on this. You know, OPA Khandepar, it was built by the Portuguese in 1956 to cater to the needs of the water to Honda and Punji. It provides water to 34% of the Goa's population. 55 plus 34 comes to 89. 89% of the Goa's population depend mainly on two these water bodies, and two these water bodies are endangered because of the mines. But neither the Water Resource Department nor the government is taking a serious cognizance and allowing mines to operate, excavate as much possible in the manner in which they were doing it. So, looking at this whole thing, neither the leaseholders are very sensible and they care for Goa. A sad thing is that being also Goan, they don't care for Goa. They want to destroy Goa. And the government is also not looking at them because they have got a threat from the mining lobby. But the most, this thing is that government has to come out with a corporation and then don't go for all 88 mines. You have to judiciously select the mines in different villages. You don't go for mines, 3 mines in a 3 square kilometers of the area. No, 1 mine at a time in such kind of a critical areas. And judiciously you have to decide how many mines to be operated. As the transportation or the production was allowed only 20 million tons, in the same manner, at a time, not more than 20 mines should be operated. And then the ore should be exported by the government, not by anyone, because as it is, the transportation which is happening now, one of the panelists said that Kaure, I had been everywhere. So nobody knows how much of the rejection or the ore has been taken out recently. How much is, as Claude has very clearly stated, that 773 crores of rupees have been lost by government for not doing the things as they should have been done. So if this is how it is happening, and if the government is very uh, bent upon giving the same leases to the same leaseholders, then nothing is going to happen. So better corporation, and then it should be managed by the government, but the government should come out with a different attitude, different pro people attitude, not pro mining attitude, leaseholder attitude. It should be pro people attitude, pro Goan attitude, pro environment attitude, pro paddy fields, water bodies, everything. And then only we can get a justice, or else we will not get a justice. The things will continue in the same vicious manner, vicious circle.
Thank you, Ramesh. So you're saying very clearly that mining can go on, but it has to be in this balanced way. It's
Yeah.
not that the people of Goa want that ground completely closed and no mining should happen. If there is something of worth in the ground and it can bring some wealth to the people and things, but it should happen in this balanced way that you have shared with us. Anamika, could you please throw some light on that in this approach uh, and the legal angle of this? You know, I'm sure you all have tried to take this approach, but are there any legal hurdles, or what is typical in the balance of this not happening now?
I mean, the legal approach, if you are to look at it, natural resources are public property. They belong to all of us. They belong to all of the Goans. So exactly, the fact that is that there has to be equitable benefit sharing if you are to extract what belongs to the public and ensure that that benefit is shared amongst all of the citizens, especially, as I said, the people who are bearing the brunt of the mining activities. So I think in terms of first and foremost, the focus has to be on rehabilitating the areas that have already been destroyed. Before you look at starting mining again, at
Right.
least at least balance the playing field again. You destroyed these areas, seriously destroyed these areas. And now that there has been a pause, the examples, at least the the positive stories that are coming up, for example, Shirgaon and even in Pisurlam, where people are trying really hard to restart agriculture, to start using those fields again and go back to agriculture, which was not possible when mining was going on. And right now you see that it is possible. We've had the Supreme Court intervention, in fact, has set up two very important things, one being the District Mineral Foundation, the DMF, and then you have the permanent fund, through which money has to be put aside. Now, for example, the DMF money has to be used for mining affected areas. So Shirgaon, for example, the desiltation that happened and all of that, finally it happened by using the money that was in the DMF. So I think that rehabilitation aspect is something that we need to look at first and foremost before you even think about starting mining again. And then you have the permanent fund, which sort of looks at the intergenerational equity aspect, where this money has to be put in and the money has to be saved in perpetuity, for an eventual time, maybe when we've run out of all our resources and we've extracted everything out there and there's nothing left for future generations. So legally speaking, actually the law has sort of evolved and provided for a situation where things can be better. The Supreme Court, the High Court has time and again, stressed upon how natural resources are public property, and the government is holding that property in public trust, right? That it's not a free for all where whoever can pay the most or extract the most, the fastest, gets to keep all of it. No, that the resources belong to all of us. And it is extremely important that it is shared with everybody. And I think something that Mr. Ramesh said makes a lot of sense, where you limit how many mines and how many leases operate in a certain area, right? That makes sense, where you cannot have one village just surrounded by mines. That village cannot survive. Shirgaon, for example, where all of it was an agricultural village, people lost their livelihood, people lost their sources of water. That's absurd. So that's a great suggestion, to limit how many mines can operate. The other thing I think would be really important is to take violations of the law a lot more seriously, where if somebody violates an environmental provision, or somebody is found to be polluting, you cannot let them continue to mine there. You cannot grant them another lease renewal, right? Take this a lot more seriously. And right now there is absolutely no deterrent to mining companies to follow the law, because nobody is serious about implementing it. So they know that they can flout the law and just get away with it, right? And maybe once in a while there'll be somebody who will take it up and fight it till they get something. But at the end, that person has spent so much time fighting it. And for the mining companies, they're just like, okay, we'll stop here, we'll start in another village, and we'll continue as is. So the situation remains the same, the people are as badly affected. So I think it's important first to focus on rehabilitation, to ensure that these mining affected areas are rehabilitated, the people are taken care of. And then secondly, if you are to start again, to please keep in mind the principles that are very much a part of the law, which is things like intergenerational equity, sustainable development, the fact that natural resources are public property and belong to all of us. And honestly, if the government was serious about implementing the law, the environmental norms are all in place. It's just a question of implementation, and proper implementation at that, and ensuring that violators are not rewarded for their violations by giving them more permissions to continue mining in these areas. That to me is absolutely absurd. And as Mr. Ramesh said, monitoring. You cannot allow an invasive industry such as mining, which can have an impact on literally everything around it. You have one mine, and then your water bodies are affected, the fields are affected, people who live around those areas are affected. How can you allow such an activity to go on unmonitored, right? So these are, I think, to me, sort of almost simple and commonsensical things that should be put in place before you start mining again. I suppose what's common sense is not common to all, or people have vested interest to make sure that that does not happen. But that's where we are. But I think it's not as bleak. We have some very, very strong people that are now fighting these situations. People have seen places like Shirgaon, and have heard stories like Mr. Ramesh, and they have felt empowered to sort of fight for themselves and ensure that this does not happen. And now with the internet and social media, I think it's also easier to mobilize people. People know their rights now. They know that they cannot be taken for granted, and I'm hoping that the people of Goa will not allow this sort of situation. And more than anything, that the government will be a lot more serious about implementing these norms if mining is to start again.
Yes, thank you, Anamika, for that. Those wonderful, insights and what should be the right approach. And a very important point that you made there also was that before renewing leases, at least the damage that has been done, at least the rehabilitation needs to happen. Meaning that these mining companies need to know that they have disturbed, they have destroyed certain things, and they just can't operate like that anymore. And because now maybe the government was not stopping them and allowed it, but now the people are asking for those for that rehabilitation and that repair. And it's so important that that gets implemented, because then they have to understand that it will be the new normal for them, that and they have to take that into account, as this is what we have to do before we proceed further. um, Vishal, would you like to please share?
Yeah, a few things. Anamika has already spoken about these things. I just wanted to recount the small victories which go into, of course, the litigation, the activism by Goa Foundation and others. They put a stop to illegal mining, but what they got implemented is the country's first intergenerational equity fund, the permanent fund. So, of course, the proposal is that 100% of that money go into the permanent fund. Right now, 10% goes in it. 10% of the fund is for the district mineralization, which is to help restore all the damage done by mining. So there's a ready fund because there's obviously going to be some damage, and so you pay before you even damage, and you keep that money aside. That's a good thing. And some other thing was to think of a mining cap, and how that mining cap determined, and the criteria is strictly environmental, of course, because there's no end to the greed. So it's an environmental. One metric to measure what is the to measure when the environment is getting critically damaged was the disappearance of windowpane oysters in the Zuari Bay when the barges were in their peak flow. So that's a keystone species, and a sudden disappearance of that and the loss of livelihood to all the fishermen along that bay was something which was a very alarming fact, and indicates where we have crossed a certain limit. Of course, more obvious things are like the groundwater getting polluted, the wells running dry. When you have a mining cap, then you can get all that ore from one or two major mines. So if you look at the mining cap which is in place, you don't have to distribute it over 33 mining leases. You can do it in a concentrated place. Then if it's in a concentrated place, then it is easier to monitor. It is easier to implement all the safeguards. It is easier to then monitor its transport, etc. And you can do it in a more technologically superior way, using mechanization, using better methods which don't cause much pollution. So that is one way to, when you restart, don't spill it all over Goa. You put a mining cap. The cap is on a sliding scale. So if you see that the areas around are getting environmentally affected, and there are parameters for that, like groundwater pollution, is one, the depletion of any keystone species is other, then the cap slides back very rapidly. And if you are able to stick to that mining cap and continue to mine, then that cap can be slowly increased. That means you are able to, so that is the way the mining cap has to be decided. So there has to be, it can't be unlimited, right? So it is a limited ore. And what is another criteria to determine that is that now suppose which we have the technology to mine all the ore that there is right now. Should we just mine it and keep it? So, and suppose we are also mining everything and keeping it in the permanent fund. What we are doing is we are denying the opportunity for employment for future generations, right? So they have the value of the ore, but they don't have the opportunity for employment. The other thing is, the Shah Commission report, and when it said rampant and rapacious mining, it said that at the rate which illegal mining was going on in its peak, all of Goa's ore could have been depleted in just 10 years. So now these leases date back to the Portuguese era, and they were for perpetuity. And it was thought that they can never deplete. That is when the early capitalists thought, that there is so much of the world to conquer. Now we'll go to Fiji Islands and start another banana republic there. Then we can go to Bahamas and take the Bihari workers there and start plantation economies. And so much of the world was left to loot and, but suddenly the acceleration it's been so fast that there's not much of a world left, and climate change is looming on us. And you realize that, you can't continue with this in this way. So whatever mining starts, it has to very strictly take into account these aspects, the environmental aspects. Yeah. But the first question for me, before we start any mining in Goa, or even if you think of, is have any of those crooks? There have been 4 Supreme Court judgments indicting all the miners, saying each and every one has committed not one but a series of violations. We have not seen one person being arrested. One even little bit of the loot has not been recovered. Manohar Parrikar stormed into power on the basis of his anti-mining corruption, anti-corruption crusader, anti-casino, etc. And we saw that just under his watch, those 88 leases were renewed, and not one person has been booked. So, I mean, like what Anamika said, unless somebody is brought to book, there is no fear of law, right? So there is absolutely, there are crores of money still to be recovered. When we talk about mining affected economy, that the amount of money which is notices for 3,400 crores have already been sent. Not a pie from that has been recovered. It's high time, and unless that, we have to do nothing. Even if you just recover that loot, or we have taken care of our, state budget for quite a few years, So
and this is precisely. Sorry to interrupt. This is precisely why I think the common man who's not even living in the mine, but the rest of Goa should be bothered about this, because the amount of the money that the state has lost, and if the state had that money, the amazing things that could have happened for Goa, that has been lost. And here, through law, we're trying to reclaim it from these mining lobbies and these mining companies. But like you're saying, nothing is coming back. So that's why I think the rest of Goa should be so bothered, because of the lack of funds for the state to do proper kind of infrastructure.
Exactly. So really, we need to see some money coming back and some people put behind bars, and before they flee to some foreign haven and start tweeting about their good life from there. So they really.
How about instead of putting them behind bars, they put them in they do an active part in the rehabilitation program, like how they did accelerated mining. there should be a sentence should come on them to accelerate, the rehabilitation. Maybe, because
Yes.
it would do much better than them being behind bars. They could be out and do some good work.
Yeah, some penance is required, I think, definitely. Yeah, so I think we all agree, like one is, the law has to be stronger. The people who are guilty have to be brought to book. Number two is that, when it starts, it has to be in a much more limited and controlled way, which is monitored, so that we don't have any of those environmental violations. And the Goenchi Mati movement puts these ideas very simply in this 5-point principle. One is that, the minerals belong to all. We are all owners of it. It is our, our property. Any loot of it is directly a loot of your money, your asset, your capital. So we have to really safeguard it. And the government is just really a caretaker. So let's not, give the government like too much like ownership over it, or it should not act like it owns it and gives it up to anybody. Number two, it's not only just owned by the present generation, it's owned by all future generations, right? So so like we say, the future is only borrowed. What we have is only borrowed from the future generations, right? We owe it to them. What we have today is what our previous generations left for us, right? So that is the second principle. It belongs to all. It belongs to future all, right? Then it says that whatever we mine, right? It should be done at a zero loss, right? If at all mining is done, it should be at a zero loss to us, because it is a sale of capital. It's like selling your family gold. So you won't want to get any less money for it, right? And the third is that it belongs to all those proceeds from mining should come back to the people. It's not revenue. It is not income, right? It is a sale of capital. It is like you're selling your asset. So that money should come back for all. And
of course, sorry to interrupt. Of course, it means that after deducting the operational expenses, after deducting profits for the company, then the balance of all that should come to the state, right?
Correct. Yeah. So the miner gets their cost of extraction, the labor, all that is cost. To earn that income, there's a cost. So, or to earn that proceeds, there is a cost. That is the people involved get their profit, but the earnings from it doesn't go into the state revenue. It's not money to be spent, right? Otherwise, then there's nothing left for future generations, right? So what you do is you save all. Okay, so you get all, you save all, and that becomes a transfer from mineral form to a money form, and that is protected against inflation, and that is the amount which is the corpus which is stored for future generations. That is one way to look at it. And then finally, any income, any real income beyond inflation and for compensating for all the losses, if there's excess income, that belongs to everybody, and that can be shared as citizens' dividend. And it is not such a radical idea. There are already 55 permanent funds operating around the world, and people, wherever it's implemented, people are just much more interested. They are much more focused on how the resources are being used, how much of it is being sold, and the question obviously arises: if it's your family gold, should you sell it now? If we can get cheaper ore from elsewhere, should be using ours? Should we be mining when the markets are low? So how to mine, when to mine, how much to mine? If the market is low, should we be, because if you don't mine it, it's still there. The value is not lost.
Correct.
But once you take it out and sell it, then it's gone forever.
Yes.
And it's not coming back. It's a non-renewable resource. So you have to be very precious about it. So this is the kind of economic framework and the moral framework and the intergenerational equity framework which the Goenchi Mati proposal is framed. And I think there is a sort of a latent environmental angle to it. Once you start valuing and putting a cost to our resource, our environmental resource, our natural bounty, then you start to value it more. The great inequality today that 1% of the people own 70% of world's resources has happened because of this transfer of public wealth into private hands. And that's where the government becomes the dalal, which is plays the, instead of the gatekeeper, instead of the chowkidar, they are doing the role of actually the dalal, the dalalgiri, and they are selling public wealth into private hands. And that creates this great inequality, that creates this great chasm between the haves and the have-nots. And that causes a lot of stress in society. Wars are fought because of it. There's social distress, there's poverty, there's outbreak of disease, there's mayhem, and we really, for good social order, we need to really avoid that kind of situation. So, so while the Guenci-Marti principles, the 5 principles I spoke about, it gives a very good guideline on how wealth should be managed, how our assets should be managed. It also has throws light on what is the value of these resources, and if they're not managed well, they are going to create this very unequal society. And we have seen how this facilitates corruption. And this is the last point I would like to bring in, is about this cycle of corruption. I always sometimes fantasize about making a series of comic books called Corruption Comics. And, it's like sort of insight into these people sitting in one room and planning the great robbery, how we will divide Goa and cut the piece of cake and eat it up, and how we share the spoils amongst ourselves. And they must have such devious plans, just to see that wicked mind operating, how they are going to rob all the assets and, deprive people by giving them 2 rupees or some kind of, incentive, which is some fake lollipop they'll put in their mouth, say they get busy sucking on it while they loot away all the wealth of the people. And so, like as Ramesh Baba said, our government is really the puppet of the mining lobby, the mining giants, who thought since Portuguese times this lease was granted to them for perpetuity and they're going to rule the roost forever. They will decide which government comes into place. They will decide on what rules they will operate. And, so this vicious cycle continues, right? And this is what they're trying even in court now. They're trying what is a legislative cure, right? Anamika, that's the right word. The legislative cure, what they're trying in Supreme Court, is to one is to get the leases extended for 50 years, and it goes on till 2037 or something like that. And so they don't want to fall into the new law, the government's own stated mineral and mineral policy, the extraction of resources policy, which clearly says auctions is the rule, leases have to be cancelled. And even when the Portuguese leases were cancelled when Goa became part of India, they were given a long rope of over 20 years. And that expired in 2007, and they continued to mine beyond that till 2012. And that's the period of the illegal mining. So, they are so used to that greed that they're never going to stop. But it's the time has come. That's the limit. You really can't go much further than that. And I think this is how we need to put a stop to it. And I don't know if Anamika can tell us about how this is going to get settled legally, and it will help us prepare better on the ground if how to fight it. And they might get some court order or half a court order in their favor, but the fight on the ground has to continue.
I mean, in terms of how this is going to get resolved, I don't think I can say which way what's going to work. I mean, we all know how it should be. We all know what should happen. So I know that anything contrary to that, that vested interests have won. That the power dynamics have sort of come into play, and that has manipulated the entire system. Any change in law now would, of course, prove what we all have been saying, which is that the mining companies run the government, and the government will do as the mining companies say. In an ideal situation, this would never happen. in a situation where your law is the supreme power, this would never happen. Where the mining companies can dictate that, hey, I don't like this law, change it for me, and the government is like, oh, okay, yeah, let's do that. And where the government goes running to the courts to plead for the mining companies.
Yes.
It's just absurd. It's absurd to me that these are players that have been found to be illegal, players. They have found to be violating the law not once but multiple times, and you still have a government that wants to fight for them and not against them, and not for the people that have been affected by all of this. So realistically speaking, I cannot say what will happen. I can only give you the sort of what ideally should happen, and if that does not happen, then it's a sad world that we live in. But I mean, we continue to be optimistic. We still continue to fight in the Supreme Court, in the High Court, for recovery of the dues that are there. I mean, we were speaking of corruption, and I think it's important to point out that Goa Foundation even went to the Lokayukta to complain of corruption, in the grant of the renewals. The Lokayukta agreed. The Lokayukta has passed its report, confirming that there was corruption in the grant of those renewals. It has recommended certain things to the government, and the government has just ignored it completely. We've had the Goa Lokayukta retire his office with such a sad state of affairs, basically almost saying, I think he said that, if the government is not going to act on my reports, then having this institution is a futile effort, right? We've had a strong Lokayukta who has, looked into this whole thing and actually come out and said that, yes, there was corruption. And the government is just looking the other way because they're busy to see how these mining companies can start again.
Yes, very right point, and view based there, Anamika. And most of the people of the country, they are all looking for the prime minister to do something to get all the black money from outside the country. That's such a long loop, and here it's within the state, and we're not able to get back the money that is stolen from us by these companies. Ramesh, would you please share some more views on this?
Yeah, I was laughing because finally Anamika also came to the same point that whatever that government wants is going to happen. And mining people, leaseholders, are sitting quiet at home, sitting in the armchair without doing anything because they know very well that the government is going to work for them, going to the Supreme Court, doing the things for the best of their benefits of the leaseholders and everything. Now, in the presently in the Supreme Court, there is a petition by one of the leading mining leaseholder that was on abolition of Concession Act 1987, which is going in the Supreme Court, that he has also challenged it. And this abolition should not take place right from 61, 63. It should be from the year where they can be benefited for or get the benefit of 50 years. So this is how it is happening. In the Supreme Court, first Supreme Court order, 397 lakh metric ton has been illegally exported. Has the government started inquiry? This much amount of ore illegally exported will give Goa 1 lakh crores of rupees. You can work for a number of years. Your budget is hardly 20 crores, 16 crores, 15 crores. You can make as many as possible the budgets every year, or you can give money to the unemployed youth, recover it, get the money, and unemployment benefits should be given to the young people, or you can go for the development. Don't call environmentalists as anti-development. You people are anti-development because you are not recovering the lakhs crores of rupees. So the entire government is anti-development, right? So this is what is the biggest joke that the government is saying. Now the coal issue, then the mining issue, every issue is there and people are fighting, and the people who are fighting are called anti-development. Anti-development. Truly speaking, the entire government is anti-development because they are
Anti-right development for the people.
anti-right. See, you are elected by the people. When the people come on the road, they become anti-development. When they vote, they are okay, good. You come to them for asking votes. And when they fight for the right, they become anti-development. And you become the right person. Well, what I have said in one of the debates, that Goan politicians do not know about Goa. That is the saddest part. No politician knows thoroughly well about Goa. What is Goa? In peace and peace, they talk about Goa. Somebody speaks on coastal area, somebody speaks on the sanctuaries, somebody speaks about the rivers, but not in the entirely about Goa is hardly known to any politician. Therefore, these problems are coming up. These are the problems which are coming up because you don't understand what is Goa. And so is the biggest challenge for the common people of Goa. So the common people is either way. Environmentally, he's also finished. Monetarily, he's been also in very risky situation, and politicians are enjoying. Politicians are enjoying. Politicians are having number of things, heavy machinery, everything is there. So what I feel is that, see, it is, I don't think that as it is, something positive or better for the people is going to take place, or even the workers or the truck owners will get benefit if the things continue in the same manner. I don't think.
Thank you, Ramesh, for that. Though it is, disappointing view forward, and but it's becoming very clear that even with coal coming into Goa, it is very clear that bigger powers and the money lobbies and these companies, yeah, they are with the money power, they are bending the rules, bending the law, and making the government, unfortunately, who should work for us, they are making them government work for them. So looks like it's going to be an ongoing struggle for from the people for justice, for for balancing these activities with mining and with all the suggestions and effort that even Goen Chamati has been doing, and so many other players also who people, individuals who I wanted to have on the panel, but of course we are limited to only 3 or 4 panelists maximum. But yes, I have seen so many people are approaching the government with good plans, with the right ideas, and also to spend their time and effort to implement it. But very little progress is being made, and very small battles are being won, but the big battle is being lost. So I will just ask the last question now and then move on to Q&A. We got just a couple of questions, so that's why I could take more time with the panel. So last question is for our viewers to understand a little more of what has been happening in Goa with respect to coal. And are there any videos they can watch, online resources? Vishal, is the Goenchamathi website there for people to get information about this? Then perhaps you could type it in the chat box. Um, yeah, Vishal, if you could do that. Anamika, would you suggest any resources or any website for our audience to go to, or any organization to approach if they want to know more about this? And if common people understand, at least from what we have talked today, that there's a tremendous loss of revenue to the state and there's tremendous money that needs to come back to the state legally, where can people go?
I mean, if you want to know about, the history of everything, the whole case situation, and even more actually, the Goa Foundation website is a good resource. Because they've even uploaded, case proceedings, orders. There's a write-up about, sort of explain what had happened throughout both the judgments. That's one good place to start. Then I think the Goenchi Mati website is a great place to go if you want to see what should be the way ahead. Vishal has very nicely sort of explained what Goenchi Mati is and what it stands for, and the Goenchi Mati website, of course, will explain more. Apart from that, I do think that social media is a good place to go. Look for the people that are fighting for these, see what they're sharing, see what they're talking about. Use these resources, to empower yourselves. The internet is a wonderful place. You'll get you'll get both sides. You'll see both sides of the coin there. A simple Google search should help you. And I'm sure if anybody wants, they can also reach out to anybody on this panel, and I think we'd be happy to see what information we could provide them with.
Yes, thank you, Anamika. And yeah, if there's any email or anything you want to share, any of the panelists or contacts, please put them in the chat box, and make sure you select to all panelists and the attendees. So then it will go to all. I know that there's a Facebook group also, Goenchi Mati Movement, right? So yeah, those of our audience who are on Facebook, definitely, it's a very unique name. You type it in, Goenchi Mati Movement, join the group, and you will start getting information and updates over there. And of course, also your suggestions for the solution and ideas will also be appreciated. So please go there and voice your opinion. Ramesh, would you want to share any resources with the people, or how they can help?
See, what I have found, let me tell you very frankly, Goan people are not ready, or not, I'm sorry, absolutely sorry, not mature to get into the issues, to fight out. Because when I started my fighting against the mining, there are a number of people, hundreds and hundreds. But later on, what I found, because I knew it very well, I was just alone. Just alone. Because, the mining people have a lot of power, money.
Yes.
Money, power. And then the power also in their support, they can do anything. They can break the unity of the people. They can hijack the people. They can hijack the movement. Everything they can do, all nonsense. And they can make the people helpless. Once people become helpless, people don't want to get into the business. That is a sad story. I have been looking at this from 2003. And particularly as far as mining is concerned, Goan people are not ready to get into this mining fight. There are a number of reasons, but even Shirgaon people, look at Shirgaon people. There are hardly 6 to 7 persons, and all other are in favor of mines.
They're in favor of it because of they are getting some kind of money from them, or it's because of pressure, or why are they okay with it?
See, everything is there. And let me tell you, even it goes to party politics. Party politics also involved, money is also involved, and then the pressure from mining leaseholders is also there. So you can't say that it is because of one thing, but I have seen now, I'll tell you, in Shirgaon, the deity Lairai is bathed with the water of the well, which is close to the temple. Now the well is going dry since last 10 years. Nobody feels it bad. The tank wherein the devotees of the Lairai used to take bath during the Jatra is also getting dry. They don't feel anything, but they want to celebrate Jatra. So if this is ironical, but this is what is happening.
Very sad.
If lakhs of people out of lakh, if only 1,000 people come on the road, because we don't want this nonsense, enough is enough, out of these devotees, everything will be put in order. But nobody is looking at that in that manner.
Thank you, Ramesh, for that.
Yes.
So I'll just take a couple of questions which are here. Um, one is name not given, anonymous. What do we need to do to convert mining areas into agricultural land? So my for the question on that is there any state policy route through which we can go, or is that again just a people's movement, or is the state supposed to work on that? Converting, yes, Vishal,
Yes.
converting these mining areas once they're done, converting them to agricultural land.
So one of the things the Goenchimati proposal has on restarting mining is, is the restoration of the defunct mines. That is one of the key things which is proposed. Filling up of the pits. There is also a book called 50 Things to or 100 Things to Do with the Hole in the Ground. So how mines have been restored ecologically, so that restoration has to happen. Because they have gone below the groundwater level, and it will continue to pollute the groundwater and continue to leach the wells dry in the region if those things are not restored. And that is also employment. So when we talk about the mining being unemployed, these are the things the government can start doing even before the mining is started. Nobody is stopping the government from creating projects to restore the leases which are not defunct, or areas where mining is not going to happen. There are many mining leases now which come into forest sanctuary areas, so there's no chance that mining will ever restart there, right?
Yeah.
There is a lot of work to be done in restoring the defunct mines. Those pits in the ground have to be restored. They have to be done in a scientific, logical way. There is employment in that. There is revenue generation in that. They can be turned into some kind of useful projects. Can be rainwater harvesting sites. They can be areas for spawning fisheries. They can be areas of study for geology. For various activities can be imagined. That is just to answer. Once you do that, that's the first step. Also, the polluter pays principle, which has happened in Sherigaon, and the DMF fund. Now, the DMF fund was going to be diverted for the corona relief, which is another thing which the Goa Foundation fought against. And so that funds are there. So this question is a very good question. So how do you get back into agriculture? So it's not so easy that tomorrow we start doing agriculture. There are many things to it, because agriculture requires irrigation, the groundwater resources have to be restored, the siltation of the fields has to be restored, and the polluter pays principle implies that the miners, they come and they pay the penalty of doing it and participate in the cleanup job, and the funds have been allocated for that, and that funds are used. And if this was done proactively, tomorrow, let's imagine there's a government which wants to set these things right. It's so easy. This government is only stuck in giving mining leases back to the same criminals. Right? Otherwise, it is really easy. There is a cleanup. There's already a fund. Just needs to be a way. People have shown the inclination, the willingness, even in small numbers, as Ramesh Baba said, few people are there. But if the money is put in and there's more cleanup, it will be an eye-opener for everybody. People will see that it is possible. Like you have mentioned, Darren, there are many sustainable occupations people can take up. There can be reskilling programs, and then the lure of mining just vanishes. If you proactively solve these things, you see a profitable agri-based economy, a profitable, sustainable system of living, reskilling of those workers, restoration of the land there, of the ecology which has been devastated, all that is restored. Then you build a new home. And all that is really important to do, and the Goenchimati proposal has very kind of significantly built that into their restart of mining program.
But yeah, just to add to what Vishal has said, see, once a mine is restored back, there is a provision in the law also, progressive mine closure plan. After all restoration of that, you have to give back the land to the landowners, earlier landowners. Government can't take it. Government can't do anything. It should be given to the individual or the parties to whom the land belonged to after restoration. So that is a big problem.
Yes. Thank you, Ramesh, for
They
that
can build
point.
IIT there. They're struggling for land.
Yeah.
So,
You can plant cashew. Cashew plantation can be done on that.
can be done. Okay.
Yeah.
So here's a question from Miguel Werner, Egypty. What lessons can we learn and apply from the effects of mining to the capitalists in poisoning our food chain and our minds and our bodies? Yeah. I mean, yeah, I guess we already know the answer to that. They come with a certain mindset, and I mean, they've probably sworn by that to the grave. And the only thing that will change them is a counter force or a counter policy. Um, so it's just like they've decided that they will play their game, and they will see who is playing the other game. I think that's the way the world is.
There is what's interesting thing about it. See, you know, the areas which are, as I just said, transportation where it takes place or mining takes place, there are a number of cases of TB, you know. But what is happening, you know, all those patients of TB are not sent to the government hospitals. They are sent to the private doctors and treatment is given. And the mining lobby or the leaseholder pays them so that no record comes to the government. So if this is a sad affair, how can we expect anything?
Yes, yes. So that's a loop that they're using for
Yeah,
these illnesses and the bad effects of mining not to get reported and noticed in the
yes,
public domain, and so that policy can't be made to put that in place.
right.
Yes, Vishal.
Uh, again, it's a very good question because what lessons do we learn? And I think we can't stop learning because there is so much to learn because this onslaught has been going on for so long. Like I mentioned right at the start, the book called Upheaval, please read it. You can get a hand on a copy of it was written in 1977, and this is such a depressing, devastating kind of book about what mining does to a beautiful village. And it continues till this date, and it continues not only in Goa. What I call it's the curse of a mineral-rich or a resource-rich, small resource-rich state. And Meghalaya is like that. Meghalaya has coal mines, it has limestone mines, and they have really just devastated their ecology. You will see trucks lined up to go into the Bangladesh border there for kilometers. You can keep driving, and that line of trucks doesn't stop. You can see this kind of devastation in every small place which is mineral rich, is resource rich, and is a small population. I understand how Ramesh Babu is completely disappointed because the system, when it's a small resource rich state, you're able to bribe everybody, and you can do a big work, and you can whitewash everything, and you can control everything because everybody is steeped in money. The whole bureaucracy is steeped in money. The government machinery is steeped in corruption, and from every family there is one member who's in the some government department, right? So everybody's fingers are in it. And once you have the taste of like easy money, of like, or let's call it the addiction of this drug, which has been given to, it's very difficult to, rehabilitate. Very important. And the resistance has to be very long. It won't come overnight. Hats off to the activism of few people who stopped mining. Ramesh Babu in 2007, he says, or 2009, and then the Goa Foundation cases went on and all that. Few individuals have been able to stop this onslaught. They have been able to save the future of many villages, the people living there. They are still fighting to restore those water bodies. So it's an appeal. Everybody do get involved, do get engaged. I come from as a designer, as a content creator, as a and I have tried to find out as much as I can about it. Try to relate it to the experiences in my life. Everybody who loves jumping into waterfalls, everybody who loves going on jungle safaris, everybody who goes to the bird festival in Goa, everybody who loves to go to this cashew plantations. The mines are just next to all that, so educate yourself, learn about how you are being controlled. Everything you aspire for is actually not your own will. It is somebody dictating to you what kind of lifestyle you should have. I mean, a question comes like somebody says, you're using these cell phones and you're using the products of mining, but you're anti-mining. We didn't ask for those things, right? They are imposed on us. It is thrust upon it. I hate my phone. I wish I could throw it into the sea and go for a swim, but I cannot get rid of it. Right? It's required for me to function. So your entire life, they have got you by the balls and they're controlling it. So take a little effort to find out how deeply they control every aspect of your life, whether there's going to be a road built or not built, or whether a port built or not built, whether a highway will come or not come, whether a forest will be cleared to make a double tracking of the railways or a highway extended. Everything is decided by somebody else. And if you're silent today, because it's not happening in front of your house, the mining trucks blowing dust is not going past your house, but it will. Because you're remaining silent, it will come to you. So don't worry about it, or it will come to you in some form. The destitute from who has been, whose homes have been torn apart from the devastation, they will come to you looking for jobs, looking for some kind of, you'll be surrounded by slums of poor people, begging all around you. How long can you be blind, and it really, the learning doesn't stop. It has to continue. We have to strategize. People are fighting illegally. But as we have seen, as Anamika said, even the Lok Ayukta, after passing an order to arrest the former CM and the mine secretary, and very strongly worded judgment, and all the judgments, they are blatant. They call it rampant, rapacious mining in Goa, and very strong terms. And that has had no effect on the government. Of course, legally they have to stop, but see how they're trying to continue it. So people are fighting it legally, but it is defeating unless there is political pressure. The pressure will come from the voters, from the people. You have to show that you're aware of these issues, that you just can't roll up your window and pretend that it doesn't happen. Anybody has flown over Goa, looked at a map of Goa, you think like, there are these beautiful lakes, cluster of lakes in the hinterland. They're not lakes, they are mining pits. If Goa is your motherland, it has been, literally portions of it has been dug and its flesh torn and sold to China. It's literally selling your motherland in the most literal terms. Like you're actually taking the mati, Guanchi mati, and selling it, right? So if you care anything about it, you have to make an effort to find out as much as you can, educate yourself legally, politically, socially, environmentally, and because it affects all these aspects of your life, and become a more informed citizen.
Thank you, Vishal, for that. Yes, a very good message to all our viewers, and I hope they take it to heart and go through the resources that have been shared here, and decide to be responsible for our future. Because, as you rightly said, when people neglect these different aspects, they're just letting go of their responsibility, and then they finally reach a future or which is become our present, where such a mess is happening. And when you look behind, you only see that it is so because we did not do certain things right in our recent past. So the time to act is now. Yes, Anamika, you wanted to add something.
Yeah, just to sort of add to, I think, what has already been said, I think one important learning maybe is to sort of redo the narrative around what is public interest and what is development really. What was said earlier about the fact that people who are fighting for the environment are not anti-national or anti-development. because it is in fact these people that are striving for sustainable development and for a better future, right? You're not anti-development because you don't want a highway to go through a wildlife sanctuary where it is legally not permissible.
Right.
All you're saying is that that is not the kind of development we want or is needed. In fact, what is public interest in this whole scenario? You know, all of these, a lot of these scenarios are sort of passed and allowed under the guise of public interest, which a lot of laws make exceptions for. But you know, when you completely change the narrative of what public interest even means, that's how these loopholes allow for these illegalities to come in, because you have completely changed the meaning of public interest. Somehow environmental protection is not public interest anymore, but you know, infrastructure development is, and with absolutely no way to sort of substantiate that, it just sort of goes, you know. So I think it's important to learn and bring back what public interest actually means and what development should be, and ensure that, you know, people that are fighting for this are not anti-national or anti-development like Mr. Ramesh said, but in fact are the people that are striving to protect you know, what this actually means.
Very right, Anamika. Thank you for that. Any last ending words, Ramesh, before we wind up?
Yeah, see, I always say that see, every individual has to strive for this one. People must learn, as Vishal has said, people must learn from how the people are fighting in the south for coal, against coal, then mining. Look at Claude or some other people from Shirgaon, those who are fighting. So if you want to take inspiration, you can take inspirations, but inspiration needs to be taken because you have to be conscious about what is happening, that we are aware. Awareness is not the end point of everything. We have to be very conscious, and conscious people can come out and they can do their duties as responsibilities as a citizen. Why mining is uh, very dangerous is, you know, when you dictate the elected government by the people, you are taking for granted the democracy. You are becoming a challenge to the democracy and the elected people. And the elected people becomes selected people. Selected. This is what is a dangerous trend which has been set in Goa since 1963 and which
I
should be
think that,
changed.
yes, your point is very right. In the people's mind, people are thinking that they are getting elected representatives, but what is
Yeah.
actually happening is selected representatives are
Yes.
coming in, which is all dictated by the money flow and
Right.
these big corporations who are playing the bigger game of power.
This,
So yes, we're done with all our questions, so we can wind up for this evening. But I think Vishal still has something on his mind because it's like no, I can see an imaginary thinking cap still going on.
Well, one small thing, I mean, sometimes like I'm just speaking from a layperson's point of view. I'm not an expert on any of these things like, legal or environmental or, social or anything. But, and sometimes there's such a big issue like mining, it can be, I know all about it because I had to design all the communications, so I had to read through it. But what I learned is, it can be overwhelming for a common person, and my communication strategy was to simplify it and break it down, use examples, etc. But in doing so, I realized that you can find a similar example in your own village, in your own locality, and doesn't have to be the mining thing which is happening far away. You can, so basically what we are fighting for, the crux of is our commons. Our commons are like, anywhere in Goa where you see a water body, you can go with a fishing rod and you can catch fish. Nobody owns that fish in the whole sea or in the whole river, right? Except for some manos which are given out on auction. So pretty much the fish is all commons, right? The trees which you see, the playgrounds which you see, if you want to enjoy your commons, you have to protect it. So tomorrow you will see that somebody is encroaching upon a playground, somebody is building a wall around a creek. Somebody is dumping their waste into a public space, and you can start fighting there. The small battles have to be fought. Forget about the larger issues if they are overwhelming. Please look at, be an active citizen in your own locality, in your own neighborhood. You'll find there are all goons of all shapes and sizes who are committing these violations, taking over public property, public assets, commons which belong to you. If you can't stand up to fight for your own uh, rights and your own assets, then nobody is going to come to save you. So find something small, understand the issues around it, and you will learn. And as Ramesh that first attempt, at least go to participate. If there's a beach cleanup drive around you, go there. There's a tree plantation drive, go there. There's a protest march, go there, participate, be an active citizen.
Thank you, Vishal. Very important advice and a good roadmap. And definitely for people who want to play the bigger game, this is a good net practice, in their in their locality itself. The important thing is, yeah, instead of talking and whining and cursing and on WhatsApp, putting all your facial emoticons, please go. Very right advice. Please go into your area and see what the rights of the commons that are being violated, and start doing something about it. I think that's the only way, the country like India, who's seeing violations on a daily basis in all the places. I think it's only the people who are going to make a difference. And thank you for that advice, Vishal. So it's time when we can wind up this evening. Thank you to Ramesh Gowns, to also Anamika and Vishal for being with us on the panel and sharing your views, the work that you all have been doing, and also the roadmap, what should be done. And I hope our audience have got good insights from it and will start thinking about it and doing something about it. And not only for this mining in Goa, but also now this bigger devil that put up its ugly head, which is the coal issue. And finally start practicing in your own area with small issues, and then come with experience to help all of us in this the good fight. Thank you and good evening.